So chapter 6 is oral and written communication. And I really love talking about this because oral communication to me, this is kind of the bones of communication study. Why do we use the words that we use? Why do we communicate the way that we communicate? And that's what communication studies degree looks at. And so our question is, why is communication important? Because the only message that counts is the message that's received. That is an exam question, and it's an important concept in public speaking. The only message that counts is the message that's received. So no matter if you meant it one way or another way, it doesn't matter what you meant. It only matters how the person, the receiver, took it, okay? Which is kind of annoying, right? If you've ever been in an argument, it's not really what you said, it's what they took the meaning to be, right? And you might be like, but I didn't mean it like that. It doesn't matter, okay? That's what they took out of your communication. Now, that can be kind of distorted, right? If you're dealing with lots of different worldviews and you're dealing with people who are not necessarily wanting to make a logical argument, that's hard, but. So oral communication is separated into 3 different communication codes, which I graded on the first speech, but very lightly because you don't really know a lot about them. So the first communication code we're going to look at is verbal. Verbal is the words that you use. So any information or any communication that's achieved through spoken interaction is verbal communication. So verbal communication includes your grammar, making sure that you're communicating correctly using correct grammar. It has to do with slang that might be used. Do we understand all the words that you are saying? It has to do with using obscenity or profanity. Do we know the difference between obscenity and profanity?
Yeah, obscenity is like when you, I guess, the body parts or whatever, you say something like about the body parts,
Yes.
And the profanity is like cuss words?
Yes.
Yeah.
So obscenity is anything about the body. Profanity typically is anything that has to do with a deity, right? Like damn, hell, God, something like that, okay? You want to be careful with obscenity and profanity anytime you give a speech. Because here's the thing, you run the risk of offending people if you use those words. But if you don't, you never will offend someone because you didn't say one of those words, right? Now, with that being said, I'm a fan of a well-placed damn, shit, or hell. That's about it, though, okay?
I was going to point that out. I had a evangelist when I was younger. He used the word shit during a sermon. He said, right now all of you are more upset about the fact that I use that word instead of about the message that I'm saying. And that's our problem now.
Yeah.
So.
I think that those are fairly, I want to say tame, right? Cuss words. They're not the big boy words. And sometimes they can really focus your attention back in, right? Now, I had a student who came straight from the military who literally used the F word in every single sentence. And I had to be like, girlfriend, it's too much. Like, I don't even really understand what you're saying because I can't tell if you're happy, mad, sad, upset. Everything sounded the same, right? Because the F word was just like pouring out of her. And I'm like, it's too much. But if I get up here and I'm talking along and all of a sudden I throw out a damn, you're going to be like, wait, okay, she got emotional about this, right? So I do think it can be used well. You just really want to know your audience and you don't want to just lay it out there, okay? You don't want to, that's not all the words that you want to use because then you're muddying the meaning. Vocal fillers also fall under verbal communication. So, like, well, so, you know, anything that you're saying that's just filling that time where your mind is trying to catch up to your mouth, that's a vocal filler. Vocal fillers are really normal. They're something that everyone uses, but the problem is when that vocal filler becomes all we can focus on. So if you say like this and like that and like and like and like and all we hear is like after a while, that's when those vocal fillers get to be a problem. Your goal in here should never be, I'm going to 100% get rid of vocal fillers. That's hard. That's too hard. But it should be that your vocal fillers do not overshadow any of your other information, okay? So that's verbal communication. The next one is, I really love to talk about this stuff. Okay, so language to me is really interesting and profound because it grows and it changes as our society grows and changes. So like if you look at these words, snout fair and curve loft, like those are awesome words, but that's not used in our language anymore. But who would have thought IOI, LOL, TBH, all of those are like terms that we understand, right? They're not even words, they're acronyms, but we've understood the meaning. If you look at words like gay, pimp, and bad, those are words that have lots of meanings now, right? Like when I was growing up, when my mom was growing up, gay was like, it meant happy, right? Everybody, like my mom has tons of friends, their middle name are gay, because that was like a really common name and word to mean happy. Then, and when I was in high school, gay was starting to mean homosexual, so it also meant like dumb, stupid, icky, right? And now, we don't really use the word anymore because it's too complicated, right? Pimp, I remember, so in the 90s, right, this was a while back, but in the 90s, there was a show called Pimp My Ride, okay, and it meant make your car really awesome. And I remember the first time I ever used the word pimp in high school, and my mom was like, you do not know what that word means. And I'm like, no, Mom, you don't know what it means, right? Because in the 90s, pimp meant cool, awesome, like it was amazing, like, oh, that's pimped out, it was really awesome, okay? That word's gone out of style, nobody really uses that word anymore, but the original, obvious definition was someone who owns girls and lets them sell themselves. And then if you think about the word bad, that word is complicated, right? If you were learning English, you would have a hard time with bad, because bad means good, but bad can mean bad as well, right? So,
Another 90s word.
yeah, even 80s, right? That's bad. Michael Jackson made that word cool, because bad was good. But you can also say, ooh, that's bad. It means bad, too. Very confusing. Of course, then we also create new words all the time, right? These were all words that went into the dictionary in the early 2000s. They're not even real, but we've made them words, right? Okay, so our words shape our thought. Here's the important thing about knowing vocabulary and having a good, big vocabulary, because first of all, if we look at the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, this says that language determines to some extent the way we view the world around us. So if you've never been exposed to the word, then you've never really been exposed to the thought, and then therefore can you actually think it, which is what's brought up in George Orwell's 1984, right? So the government gets rid of books and they get rid of written language, so nobody can have anything in writing, and so then they rewrite history because nobody can go back and read it to remember what actually happened. And so the whole point is, like, if we get rid of all the books and we get rid of all the words and we get rid of the word anarchy, will anybody then know to overthrow the government because they've never actually heard the term, and therefore could they think the thought? So words are profound, like they have a lot of meaning, and it's just super interesting to me. All right, let's talk about vocal communication a little bit. Vocal communication relates to how your voice works, okay? The workings or the aspects of your voice. These are probably the most common that I would grade on or look at. Volume, how loud or soft you are. Rate of speed, how fast or slow you speak. Articulation and pronunciation. Okay, so articulation means, do you say all of the sounds that are present in the word? If you're from Texas, you have terrible articulation, right? Because we don't say any INGs. We don't say going, we say going. We don't say happening, we say happening. We don't say, anything ING we don't say, and then we also have a lot of trouble with OI, right? Like oil. I never say oil, I say oil, because that's the way everybody around me says it, right?
Have you ever tried to do speech to text on your phone?
Yes, it's frustrating.
Yes, it is. I was about to point that out. I know a lot of people from different areas are like, your sentences are messed up. I'm like, that's because I have to go back and edit them.
Yes.
Because my speech to text doesn't catch my accent.
Yes, and articulation, that is a regional thing. There are people that argue that if you are speaking within the regional dialect, then you actually are speaking correctly because that is the regional dialect that you are using. I would agree with that, but also remember that we are in a classroom full of people not necessarily all from Texas, right? So we have to make sure that they understand what it is that we're actually saying. So we're bad at articulation. Pronunciation is, do you pronounce the word correctly? Okay, so it's not just like dropping words or like sounds, it's like, do you pronounce it correctly? So if you say accent instead of asking, you're pronouncing it incorrectly, okay? Now you can argue that's a regional dialect, right? That's a part of code switching. Yes, but, okay? Anytime you're in giving a public speech, your diction, your articulation, your pronunciation, it needs to be right. Plus, when you mispronounce words, that's a really quick way to turn off your audience and hurt your credibility, right? So like one time I had a student give us a speech and they started their speech with an attention getter. It was a quote by Plato. And if you don't know how to say Plato's name, you shouldn't be using a quote, right? So anytime you mispronounce something like chaos instead of chaos, it affects the way the audience sees you. So you want to be careful with pronunciation. And then tone. So tone has to do with like how high, how low your voice is. And we know that a lower tone tends to be easier to listen to, okay? So if you get upset, excited, and your tone gets really high, that can be something that people can tune out. So you want to keep a lower tone if you can. I'm never going to grade on, your tone, because that would take years of vocal training that we're not doing in here. All right, let's talk about nonverbal. So nonverbal is your body, gestures, and facial expressions. Facial expressions are created with your eyebrows, your mouth, and your eyes. So when you think about how hard it is to listen to someone who has a mask on, it's because of half of the face is covered up. Nonverbal communication is the majority of where we get the message. It's not from the words we use and it's not from the tone or vocal. It's from nonverbal. So facial expressions tell us a lot about the person and about the meaning of the message. The body is the other way that we get that nonverbal, so posture, gestures, handshakes say a lot about you, room arrangements, and your clothing, okay? So I don't have a lot of time to talk about this. Room arrangement actually says a lot about the kind of person you are, the kind of thing. Like, I hate the way this room is arranged, but there's really, in COVID times, no way to change it because you have to sit all like this. But I really want the tables and chairs, which I've been asking for like 3 years, but, budget. Because that creates a more melded, meshed room. It's not so sterile like this. Like if you come into my office, you will notice that it's my door, my desk, and then me. And I have a desk in between me and my students on purpose, right? That's a conscious decision that I made because that says, oh look, I'm behind the desk, you're in front of the desk. So it tells you something about my position, if that makes sense. Clothing is also part of nonverbal communication. I know none of us want to be judged based on what we're wearing, but you are all the time, okay? So just be aware of that. It's the one thing that you have complete control over when you get up here to give a speech. You have complete control over what you put on that day, okay? All of that comes together to create nonverbal communication. And here is, we'll go through that. Okay, here is the order of importance. So this is an exam question. And so if I ask, list the communication codes in order from most important to least important, you're going to say nonverbal is the most important, vocal is the next important, and then finally verbal. Okay? So what you do with your body and your face, that's most important. The volume, tone of your voice is next most important, because in the middle. The least most important thing is the actual words that you use. Okay? The reason nonverbal is the most important, if I said to you, y'all have a good day, or y'all have a good day, right? One of those things means something completely different. Are you going to say, but she said have a great day, so she meant it, right?
No.
No, you're going to look at what my body did first, right? And then if you look at sarcasm, sarcasm is all about tone, right? It's not about the words being said, it's all about the tone. That's why little kids don't get sarcasm, because they haven't learned about that yet. So when my kids finally learn about sarcasm, I'm like, oh, because it kind of makes it not fun anymore, right? Until they start using it back to me, and then I'm like, oh, you think you're funny. Okay, so nonverbal, vocal, verbal. That's in order of most important to least important. We're not going to talk a lot about written communication because I talked about email at the very beginning of the semester. I do want to just bring up social media very quickly. Social media, can affect you and will affect you in this world, okay? In your job search, in how you get into colleges. Just be aware of it. Know that anything you put on the internet is on the internet forever. It doesn't matter if you deleted it. Someone somewhere has a screenshot. Plus, nothing that went on the internet ever can actually be deleted. So be very aware of that. There's lots and lots of cases of people losing their jobs based on social media posts. And everyone will say, but First Amendment. Okay, but First Amendment says you have the right to be protected from the government. Okay, you have the right to say anything you want. The government's not going to come and haul you off to jail. Doesn't mean that your boss won't fire you. Okay, they are not, your freedom of speech has still consequences. And if it's something that makes your boss or their company look bad, then they can get rid of you and you don't have any repercussions. So here's all just some examples. This bottom one, the University of Alabama Professor Gloria Gadsden of East Stroudsburg, sort of controversy with her Facebook status. Does anyone know where I can find a very discreet hitman? Yes, it's been that kind of day. They took immediate action and terminated her. So just be aware of what you're putting on social media. And then I want to bring up CMC. So CMC is computer mediated communication. It's a pretty new form of communication that we are studying because really it's only been around since the 90s. 80s, but nobody really had lots of computers. So CMC is anything that's communication in electronic format. So texting, email, IM. Knowing the difference between asynchronous versus synchronous. So asynchronous means that we're on at different times, whereas synchronous means like I'm here and you're here and it's live, right? So if you have to do any kind of synchronous meeting, and I'm going to tell you right now, that is where the world is going, right? So a lot of job interviews now are synchronous online virtual meetings, and it's complicated, but our book has a lot of information that you can use thinking about your nonverbal, verbal, and vocal, okay? And it's actually a lot harder in online because nonverbal, to look at you, I have to look at the camera, not actually at you, right? So thinking about eye contact, thinking about my movements, being aware of my background. Anytime you can have a plain, quiet, nice background, you need to have it. You don't want to have people coming in and out behind you. You don't want to have your bed behind you. You don't want your bed unmade. We interviewed a professor through Skype like 3 years ago, and as soon as the interview was over, 3 of our professors said, we're not hiring him, and he didn't make his bed. And I don't even think he didn't make it. I think it got flipped over, like the corner was just flipped over. That was all they could concentrate on. They didn't even ask him anything else. They were like, done. He's not somebody that we want. So you want to be aware of sound and lighting. This lighting is the worst, okay, for an online meeting because it makes you look really red, yellow. If you can have natural lighting, that's best, but you don't want to be backlit, right? So you never want to be in front of a window because then all we see is the light behind you. We don't see your face. If you are in a room with a fan, make sure the fan is off. Because if the fan is not off, then it's rotating, and then the light looks like a strobe light on top of you. But your biggest advantage to any kind of virtual thing is to prepare ahead of time, okay? That's your biggest advantage. All right, questions about nonverbal, verbal, and vocal communication? Ultimately, anytime you communicate, try to use these questions. Is it true? Is it kind? Is it necessary? Is it clear? Okay, clear communication is kind communication. There's a podcaster, and I can't remember her name, but she says that. Clear communication is kind communication. So don't be more worried that your message is making sense above all else, okay? And we're not going to watch this, but his little kids come barging in. It's so cute. All right, so that is chapter 6.